Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for delay, but we are having some technical problems here. It's not yet resolved, but we are doing our best here to put the slides on the screen here. Meanwhile, Tanya will keep doing the part 3. And once we have the slides ready, we will put this up, okay? Apologies for any inconvenience caused. And that's it. So thank you all. Thank you all my friends from Ireland. Thanks from UK. Today we have, let me see here, Brazil with us. And of course, our guys from America. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. We had a very sunny and nice and blue sky day here in Ireland. Vitamin D recharged. So it was lovely, at least here where I live. I don't know where you live, Tanya, because you live more than the south of the island. So I don't know if you had the same blue skies as of today.
Thank God. At last.
Yeah. Yes. So it's nice to have you all here with us today. So just an explanation. So I will start the meeting today, but I will not finish. Our dear Nate will replace me as I have another commitment in 40 minutes. Okay, so once Tanya starts, I will go on, and I will see you on Tuesday, and Nate will be here. So thank you very much for everything. So don't say it's no melting fast there. Yeah, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, my friend. So spring is coming. It's our doorstep. So let's the spring come. And I know for you guys it's good, but for us in Ireland, it's gonna be tough because our lockdown was extended until April. So 1 more month of lockdown. But it is what it is. Sorry?
1 more month of staying very safe while the numbers get lower.
Yeah. And we're gonna get there, I'm sure. Okay, looks like I'm seeing the deck here. Let me see. Just make a quick test here. Tanya, can you see?
Hallelujah.
Yeah, great. Resolve it. Yeah. Thanks to Nade. She's on the background working there here. Okay, great. Okay, let's do it our initial prayer. So I'm gonna ask everyone to calm down, relax, raise up your thoughts, make connection with superior spirits, with our mentors. Ask them to enlighten our speaker today, also Nate and myself. Extend these good vibrations to all brothers and sisters who are suffering or are in struggle moments right now. May these good thoughts help them to understand their current situation, calm down, and keep their faith up. Thank you, protectors and higher spirits from Ireland, from Kardec Radio, from all the other countries that allowing us to reach someone. So be it. Amen. Okay. Let me say hi. Hey, Robbie, how are you? I hope you're good in the sunny California, my friend. So, just a short briefing from what happened last 2 episodes. Tanya is giving a talk developing bright young minds. And we divided these in 3 parts. Today is the last part, in which we will have her final explanations about the 10 attributes. And again, this is a kind of open eyes to all parents. And it's not necessary a spiritist context, but as we have the Spiritism teachings and developing bright kids is one of these principles, fundamentals. So this is why we are trying to giving these open eyes to all parents, because we know they are struggling this time in order to have the kids locked at the home, homeschooling. At the same time, those parents who used to work all day just see the kids at night for a few hours, and now with this current situation we are going through, the parents are spending more time with the kids, and this is so important. And we perhaps don't see the reasons today, but we will reap good fruits in the future. Okay, Tanya, I said too much. Thank you very much. And break a leg.
And still stay standing on one. Okay, because I'm at a sit-stand desk.
Put it here.
Thank you for setting
here.
There, Stevan. It's spot on.
Yeah. Okay.
So Neji, if you could click on slideshow. Please, yeah. And then current slide.
It is at the bottom on your right-hand side.
So while Neji's getting that up, just to show the full slide,
yeah,
I'll start so that to set the context, as Stevan rightly said, at the moment, these are very challenging times for
from current slide, Neji.
For parents. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks a million,
you guys. Thank you.
Great teamwork. So, you know, in the context of the challenge for parents or indeed caregivers, because it may be that there are others who are helping with the care of kids, and including when we come out of it, that it represents both challenges and opportunities to give kids the best start in life, the start that we would all hope for. And as psychology and neuroscience continues to advance, and we have the benefit of the internet and other means to disseminate new information, I just wanted to share the findings of a book, or the findings of the research of a guy called Professor Steve Peters, who's a British psychiatrist who has worked with adults and also with children. And from his many, many years of experience, he has distilled 10 healthy habits that he wanted to bring to parents, teachers, and caregivers to help them to support kids to develop healthy minds, a better understanding of how the mind works and the kind of habits that will lead to a healthier and happier mind in the future. So he wrote a book called The Silent Guides, which is geared towards adults, and My Hidden Chimp, which is the companion book that is for aimed at children of primary school age. And you can see there on the slide the 10 different habits. We've been through the first 7, and today we're going to finish the last 3. And what I'm doing is, as I go through, and again, just to flag, these are all evidence-based, because he is a scientist, so these are very much evidence-based, that I would like to link to Spiritist teachings, because I see, as I read the books, I saw a real parallel with Spiritist ideas and teachings, and just wanted to bring the best of both to these talks. So, Neji, if you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide, that would be great, please. So, a book that he wrote before these is called The Chimp Paradox, and it sets a framework, I guess is the best way of putting it. A structuring of the brain along 3 main systems. The first is the human, which is the rational, logical, conscious part of us. It thinks in terms of current knowledge, current situations. This is the real us. This is like the latest software upgrade that we've had. The second is the chimp, which is reactive, emotional, and impulsive, doesn't think things through, reacts rapidly, much, much more quickly than the human, and is in survival mode. It's like the unconscious, the inner child. And then the third is the computer, which is a memory bank of stored memories, beliefs, learned behaviors that the chimp and the human had in previous experiences. So exposure they've had from previous experiences, family beliefs, the beliefs in the culture that we grow up in, what we see in the press, work culture, etc. And from a Spiritist perspective, we would see the programming that we bring from previous lifetimes, the habitual thought patterns that we have from previous lifetimes. So these 3 systems interconnect and influence each other. So the human is kind of the real us, as he says. It's the conscious part of us. It's the now us. The chimp is deeply emotional, and the computer reflects the past. And so upgrading the computer, just in the same way that we upgrade our computer by downloading new software with new beliefs and new perspectives that are healthier, will help prepare individuals, not just children, but adults, for future situations to respond in more skillful ways. And so the adult has a great opportunity to help the child, when the mind is very open, to develop a series of beliefs that will be a bedrock for them going into their future adult life. So, Neji, if you wouldn't mind going on, please, to the next slide. So, the 8th habit here features, I love this image. It's 2 adorable little guys who are climbing into bed quite happily, which is unusual, because Professor Peters makes the point that many kids do kick up when the time comes to go to bed. And so accepting that no means no. Another way of seeing that is learning how to manage disappointment. So teaching the child to manage that disappointment when things don't go their way. And a way to do that is by programming beliefs earlier in life that will fill that computer, so that when they hit a situation, automatically that's the belief that comes up. So he gives some lovely examples, I think, of beliefs that would be really helpful to put into a child's mind. For example, and I quote, "Complaining and getting upset are not typically helpful." And certainly that is something that is very consistent with Spiritist beliefs. Now, there are there are occasions where complaining can be the right thing. If we find, let's say, there's medical error and we want to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else, it is right to complain. But generally, complaining about something that can't be changed and getting upset about it is not going to be helpful. Accepting what cannot be changed is a smart thing to do. So accepting what cannot be changed is the right thing to do. There, it reminded me of the Serenity Prayer for Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, Lord, help me to change the things that I can, to accept the things that I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Effectively, this would be teaching that person at a very young age to accept the things that cannot be changed, so to avoid disappointment that could come in the future, which could lead to a lot of emotional struggles and conflicts. Another belief he advises is moving on to something else is sensible. Again, if we come up against something that we can't change, it makes much more sense to move on and put our energy into something new than continue to look at and agonize over what we can't change. Another important point that he makes is help the child learn how to express how they feel, so that they don't repress it or deny it, because then it can come out later in inappropriate ways. So, for example, teaching them the emotional literacy to express, I'm feeling disappointed, or I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling whatever it may be, as long as it's not going into really, really strong feelings, like real strong anger, not to go too deeply into that, but nevertheless help the child to develop an outlet, to acknowledge their feelings, and then start focusing on a plan to move on. And that's the final step that he speaks about, is having a plan to move on from disappointment. So, for example, a plan to move on could be putting a new challenge in place. If the child has had poor results in an exam, for example, the challenge could be to do better next time, and to study, to review study patterns, to challenge them to do better next time. Or it could be in terms of sports, or it could be whatever it may be. Another plan to move on could be a pleasurable activity to distract the chimp. So having a play date, or watching a film maybe that the kid loves, or something, if it's something particularly disappointing. But distracting the chimp, which again is that unconscious inner child that can be so reactive. So distracting it until things calm down, and then things can be looked at in a more reflective manner. So overreacting to things not going our way, not going the way that we want, is something that, from a Spiritist perspective, probably we've brought from not just this lifetime, but from another lifetime. So helping a child in this incarnation to learn to accept that life doesn't always go the way we want, but we can still move on and we can still enjoy life, will be really, really helpful for them for the future. In the Spiritist literature, you often see a number of the Spiritist authors writing about the quality of resignation, which for me is the equivalent of this concept in psychology of managing disappointment. Accepting no means no. So simply accepting sometimes things are not going our way can save us much prolonged disappointment, and potentially even depression or deterioration in mental health. Because that disappointment, when it becomes prolonged, can have serious spiritual implications, whether for a child or an adult. And so helping the child learn to move on to a more positive, a more hopeful wavelength, acknowledge the feeling, but then be more constructive, focusing forward, will really be a protective factor for them psychologically and spiritually in the future. So going back to Professor Peters, he speaks about the fact that it's far better to deal with this in advance of being in the situation. So, for example, to this example in the photo here, disappointment about going to bed, talk through it before bedtime. Help the child to understand what are the consequences of staying up too late. Because at the time of bedtime, the child will be in chimp mode and they won't be open to reason. They'll be focused on the disappointment. So focusing on the benefits of going to bed on time, what the rewards are, including positive rituals such as a bedtime story, the fact that they'll be bright and energetic for the next day. Because if they go to bed late, they'll be falling asleep, they'll get into trouble with the teacher, they won't be able to perform as well. So focusing on the positives and highlighting, the disadvantages of not going to bed. So getting them to see that there's a reason why that it makes sense to go to bed on time. The other point that he makes is the importance of being consistent with the child, to set healthy boundaries, that it is consistently the same time, because otherwise the child will get confused, will think it's variable, and they will challenge it. And setting healthy boundaries is a really good way of helping that child feel safe psychologically and emotionally when there's consistency. And so just one last thing I'd add from a Spiritist perspective is going to bed can be a good time to put something positive into the mind of the child before they go to sleep, when the mind is more open and open to suggestion. So one example is to pray to their spirit guide, to their guardian angel, to start developing a habit of making that connection, asking the child if they have any worries, and helping them to voice that, to then, if possible, to put their worries to rest, to help them to gain the perspective that they may lack. Ask the child what went well, to look back and focus on the positive in the day as well. So it's an opportunity to start developing that habit of focusing on the good in life, the good in themselves, the good in others, and the good in the situations they came across. And an opportunity to really bond with the child during that time before they go to bed, plan the next day. Something that could be lovely to do with them is a visualization of imagining that they connect to their guardian angel, to imagine what they look like, or to imagine a light coming down from on high that gradually runs through their body, from the head through the body out through the toes, and that energy, that light, that energy of love would dissolve any worries or concerns that they have and replace them with a sense of well-being. So effectively developing a habit of connecting to higher energies, and to develop a habit of self-healing, and learning that mental focus at an early age would do them a huge favor for when they need it when they're adults. So Neji, if you wouldn't mind moving through to the next slide, habit 9, learning to share. So here we've a lovely example of two happy campers. And in some ways, this is the other side of an earlier habit, which is learning how to ask for help. And here it's learning how to share. Professor Peters makes the point that sharing is a great habit because it helps us develop friendships. It helps us to learn as we share our knowledge with others, just as others do with us. It helps improve our interpersonal skills, and it supports learning how to collaborate so that more effective work can be done. He then goes on to say, and I thought this particularly interesting, between the ages of 9 and 11, children place more emphasis on friendships and start to move away from family and parents and focus on friends more, which can bring worries about being accepted and being popular with their peers. That grows during their teenage years as they look far more to their peers for support than to an adult, and peer pressure can build and can become incredibly significant to their emotional stability and resilience. As they go into adulthood, peers become more of a guide than the basis for their emotional stability. So learning how to build successful relationships with their peers, with children of their age is a key skill to acquire. And helping a child to build resilience is key to building resilience for later in life. And I quote here, he says, children who react with strong emotions tend to create negative feedback from their peers. So helping a child to learn to manage their emotions can help them get much more positive responses from other kids that they interact with, which in turn will help them build resilience later in life. They'll have more confidence because if they're having better emotional reactions, they'll have more positive experiences. That will help them build self-confidence in relationships. So helping a child as well, he highlights, to learn at a young age to accept different points of view and to learn how to share ideas and how to focus friendships on shared values rather than, say, somebody being cool, but that they have shared interests and shared values. So in effect, preparing a child for developing behaviors that are based on ethical values and ethical foundations. So for example, showing respect for others, being considerate, is again a cornerstone of learning to develop successful relationships. And time again, psychology research is showing that that is key to happiness, is having successful interpersonal relationships. So another point he highlights to help sort of develop these relational skills is to get the child to engage in practical projects to be done in collaboration with others. So for example, designing a meal plan for the week, designing a treehouse, doing something fun like designing a playroom. So learning how to share their point of view, learning how to negotiate over what they want, learning how to explain their feelings, learning how to plan a project, learning how to implement a project. So basically learning how to work in a team, which is an essential skill to have in life, whether it's in a professional context when they're at work or in a personal context in the future when they're in a relationship, whether it's sharing a flat with friends or in a marriage, learning how to work as a team. So already teaching them as a child on how to do tasks that require collaboration, and ensuring that in that team that are working together, that every child has a task allocated to them so that they feel a part of it, included, and a key part of the success of the project. And working in teams, again, he highlights, helps kids learn how to see somebody else's point of view, and ideally to see the value that comes from having additional perspectives. And so he also makes the point that it's important for them to learn, ideally from a parent or carer in advance, before they go into these kind of collaborative projects, that not everybody will want to share, and to learn how to deal with that when other kids don't want to share. So this is all well and good in theory. In practice, we know that it can be much more challenging to get kids to share and to work together, to play together, and it can end up in tears and squabbles and tantrums. So he explores how to prevent this. And he gives a lovely example of a play date with two young boys, I think aged about 3, who are getting together to play. And very quickly, both of them want the same toy at the same time. And a fight breaks out and they start hitting each other. And he makes the point that children have an inbuilt sense of fairness and feel gypped if they're not getting an equal amount of something. So they have a strong sense of what they believe should happen and become very upset when it doesn't. So preparing the child in advance by telling them that most likely their inner chimp will react and may become aggressive, but this is their chimp and not them, which I thought was a really interesting concept. And he gave an example of, I think it was a 4 or 5-year-old girl who he explained the chimp model to, and she accepted it really easily and got it and was able to work with it. And that he then goes on to make the point that if a child is told they're bad very frequently, it's very hard for them to remove that from their minds later. They've effectively been programmed into thinking they're bad. They've internalized that voice. So instead, telling the child about the chimp and working with them for an alternative response in advance, so that the chimp's behavior is not what we want, but that's not the real them, to help them to start to develop a perspective that will empower them to start managing their chimp in a better way. So then he goes on to talk about how to encourage positive or desired behaviors. And one great way is to harness the fact that most children want an adult's approval. So ensure that it's clear to the child what that desired behavior is, and then reward that behavior with the approval of the parent or the carer. He makes a really important point that I think not always people realize is beliefs drive our behaviors. So beliefs that the child holds will determine how the child behaves, and beliefs, underlying beliefs, will determine how we feel. So if the child believes that the other child will break their toys, then they won't want to share. But if the child is helped to accept that toys get broken, or an alternative could be offering to replace any toy that gets damaged, that may help to settle down the chimp. Or another alternative could be get the child to pick out the special toys that they really love beforehand and put them away before the visitor arrives. So preempting situations that potentially could lead to the chimp overreacting is a very productive and helpful way to deal with things. Another perspective he gives is remind the child that any situation is temporary and it will pass. So the friend that's there is only there for a very short period, and that afterwards they can play with all the toys again after they've gone. And that will be doing them a really big favor, because if we think of the coronavirus situation at the moment, for many of us adults, if we hold that firm belief that this is temporary, that it will pass, it will help us be more patient, that we need to sit out through lockdown and stay safe for the sake of each other. So that age-old expression, this will pass, is something that can actually be helpfully put into the mind of the child at a relatively young age. He then goes on to say, if the adult wants to encourage specific positive behaviors, then practicing that in advance through role play can help achieve that. Kids generally love role play, and so getting the chance to play out the desired behavior and experience the consequences, and practice the unwanted behavior and then see what the consequences are, it gets them a chance to to see what is preferable and to see what will give the desired praise that they want and the rewards that they want. But of course, it takes time to embed these kind of new beliefs and new positive behaviors. So he underlines the fact that patience is absolutely essential and very helpful. So he goes on to say that being a parent is much like being a coach in sports, that no matter how good the coach is, eventually the athlete will have to go out and perform. So even the most skilled parents can't guarantee a well-behaved child. Children eventually must learn how to manage themselves. So even if things do kick off and the child misbehaves, he recommends that actually it's best to wait for the situation to end and for the child to calm down and then discuss it with them. Because when they're in chimp mode, when they're being overreactive and emotional, they're not going to listen. But when they've calmed down, then it's a good opportunity to look back, to discuss it, and to learn the lessons from it going forward. And he makes an interesting point. He says it can be really helpful to explain to the child that other children also experience what they have experienced. so that they don't internalize that feeling of feeling bad about themselves. So again, just drawing a parallel with Spiritist ideas, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 14, item 9, there's a passage basically highlighting that we bring forward good or bad instincts from past lifetimes. And so that's in a spirit who is reborn into the body of a child. And these tendencies will manifest from early childhood. So parents should study these innate reactions and be on the lookout for the least sign of any bad habits, and look to change them before they have time to take root again. So like a good gardener who prunes a plant to reshape it, to look out for these signs of whatever the quality may be that is undesirable, to really help that spirit already when they're more open-minded as a child and more willing to be educated or re-educated to develop new ways. A key defect that the Gospel According to Spiritism highlights is selfishness is a key one to watch out for, and helping the child to develop selflessness is to be encouraged. And so it goes on to say, when parents have done everything possible for the moral advancement of their children, even if they have not been successful, then they have nothing with which to reproach themselves, and their consciences may remain tranquil. For the understandable suffering resulting from the unproductiveness of their efforts, God reserves a great and immense consolation in the certainty that it's only a brief delay, that it will be given to them to conclude in another existence the work already begun, and one day their ungrateful child will recompense them with love. So very much presenting the role of parent as an opportunity to help a spirit who has been reborn to develop new and better ways of being. And the spiritual support is there as well, with the spirit guide of the parents and of the child as well, as a resource to connect to ask for guidance when struggling. So effectively, this is a key skill to share. As we know, it can help develop good friendships. It can help with learning, with growth. It can help in learning how to be good at teamwork and collaboration. They're all good ways of learning how to share. And so preparation and scenario planning can help prevent and manage conflicts in a better way, and may transform the future of a spirit who's come back to learn new and better ways, and so helping sow the seeds of their future happiness. So Neji, if you wouldn't mind going on to habit 10, please do what you have to do. So here, the spirit guides Emmanuel and Joanna de Angelis both say at different points in their books the importance of honoring our commitments and take care to only commit to what we know we can and will fulfill. And so basically, how do we make ourselves do what we need to do, even when it's not pleasant? So a classic example he as in Professor Peters gives is children with untidy and messy bedrooms. So realistically, many, if not most people, he says, when their kids are teenagers, are untidy. And he makes what to me was an interesting point, is that many young people find it difficult to manage their feelings, and that can lead to unhelpful behaviors such as procrastination and avoidance of unpleasant activities. So actually the reason is difficulty in managing their emotions. So avoiding doing something that needs to be done shows an inability to manage feelings. So these types of feelings are based in the chimp brain, so like the amygdala. And so it's a question of recognizing this and managing the chimp. So it's not the chimp that decides our behaviors, but it's the human. And he makes the point that a habit is simply a learned behavior So being tidy is a behavior that can be learned and developed over time. Our feelings, as I was just saying, are based on beliefs. So if we want to change our feelings, the beliefs need to change. 20 years ago, I didn't know that. So it's a great education to teach a child already that they can begin to learn how to manage their emotions by working on the beliefs and the thoughts that they entertain. So, for example, then putting it into practice, asking a child to think about what are the advantages of doing whatever needs to be done. In other words, how will they feel when it's done, when they've done their homework, when they've done the washing up, when they've done the taking out the bins, when they've done tidying up their bedroom, and how will they feel when it's not done? And usually, Professor Peters says, usually they basically want the result, but without the effort. Which I think many of us could recognize and identify with. So remembering from what we discussed earlier, when the adult wants a desired behavior, in order to manage the chimp successfully, we need to reprogram our beliefs. We need to reprogram the computer. So help the child to program their computer with helpful, constructive beliefs. Because if there is no program in the computer to deal with avoiding doing certain things like homework, washing up, tidying bedroom, etc., then either the chimp will take over or the computer will react with unhelpful behaviors like procrastination. And often a reason people don't start something, he goes on to say, is because they, or rather their chimp, finds it overwhelming. So a solution could be to pick out one easy step just to get started that the chimp won't react to. So, for example, start with just one corner of a bedroom and celebrate that to encourage the chimp, to give the child that feedback, that positive feedback. In terms of homework, it could be pick out one small area of study for, let's say, 15 minutes just to get started and to feel satisfaction about that. And then that first step can be followed by some others and then gradually building up a study pattern. So breaking things down into smaller steps and then celebrating each step is a way of encouraging the child or the person rather than berating them for not doing something, not studying for their leaving cert, not studying for their junior cert or whatever it is, but breaking it down and celebrating and encouraging them. And getting them to think about how will you feel once you've done it can be a great motivator to help them get started. So again, allied to this is basically helping a child to develop a work ethic, as he makes the point that work ethic is one element of ourselves and our self-image that is clearly very relevant here. Helping a child to develop that could be a great blessing for the future. So learning to become someone who's responsible, who's accountable for their work, who takes pride in a job well done is very, very desirable, particularly as a future employee or even as a volunteer, or also in a relationship, successful relationships where we can rely on each other in people pulling their weight and fulfilling their side of the household tasks, for example. So separately, looking into Spiritist literature, the Spirit Emmanuel takes this a step further and says work is how we develop intellectually and how we evolve. Whether it's paid or voluntary doesn't matter. Engaging in useful work helps the spirit develop themselves, and without work we would stagnate intellectually and spiritually. So even if somebody is unemployed for whatever reason, temporarily or otherwise, there are still opportunities to work in other useful ways, helping others, volunteering, studying, even through prayer. There are a myriad of ways in which the mind can be channeled in constructive and positive ways. Professor Peters goes on then to talk about automating our thinking to help us do what we have to do. So programming the computer, for example, on a Saturday morning after breakfast, that the child tidies their room and it becomes an automatic behavior so that there's no thinking required. And to learn to refuse to get into any discussions about it. So programming a thought, a belief such as don't think, start now into the computer. And that short command, don't think, start now, could be so useful for the future. It could start with the bedroom, tidying the bedroom after breakfast on a Saturday. It could then be about learning to study when they're doing their leaving, or if they go on to university. It could be as simple as getting out of bed on a cold winter's morning. Don't think, start now. Don't think, get up now. But to start to effectively get the human to be the one that's in charge of the chimp and not the other way around. So another strategy for helping children learn to do what they have to do is to create enjoyable links. So making it an enjoyable exercise, turning it into a game, for example, which would be much more engaging and much more likely to succeed. Or if it's something that it's hard to make enjoyable, then turning it into a challenge and harnessing their competitive instincts in a positive way. Or an alternative could be playing music that they love, that can really help with motivation. And also the all-important reward of praise or doing something fun afterwards can really act as an incentive as well, to help them, to encourage them to do what they have to do. So basically, it reminded me a bit of that bit of Mary Poppins, where there's a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And if there was time, I would have played it, but unfortunately there won't be time. But this is the lesson she teaches, is to take any job that's very mundane and make it fun. And she shows how the robin feathering its nest, she goes through nature and she makes it a joyful exercise for them to tidy their bedroom, which is an absolute mess. So look out for that in Mary Poppins, and it's a great way to open up the conversation with kids to watch Mary Poppins. There's many, many really positive lessons in that film, and it's as much a joy for adults, or at least for this adult, as it is for kids. So another point that Professor Peters makes is learning to commit. And committing and fulfilling our commitments regardless of how we feel. So not waiting until we're in the right mood, because if we wait for that, then something may never actually happen. It may never get done. So it's important to recognize when our feelings are holding us back, acknowledge them, and then set them to one side and still take action to do what we need to do. Feeling good and feeling motivated will follow after we take action and fulfill our commitments, not the other way around. So the feelings will follow the thought, the action, and then the feelings will follow. He goes on to talk again about complaining, that, for most of us it's natural that we complain every now and then, but generally it's not very helpful. A benefit of complaining is it can help us to express our feelings, to get things off our chest. But generally, most people don't really want to sit and listen to somebody moaning and complaining. So his advice is that it's best to complain to ourselves and to set a time limit so that we don't get too caught up in it. And for anybody with mediumship, that would be exceptionally good advice to learn to develop that habit, to limit the amount of time that we get involved in complaining. And ideally eliminate it, because then he goes on to say, to address this actually in a more constructive way, he suggests to always think of something positive to say about any situation. And that actually is something you come across in Spiritism. It can be challenging in some situations, but to look for the good in any situation. And I would suggest again, for anybody who's a medium, that would be exceptionally good advice and great education to train a child in that, because it will move them onto a better wavelength, onto a higher frequency, away from negativity that could be exploited, spiritually speaking, and instead, by moving to a solution focused and looking for the good in, let's say, the coronavirus situation, and staying focused on that is a really protective factor for mental health and for spiritual health as well. Easier said than done, but this is the advice of the professional in terms of Professor Peters, but also of Spiritist authors such as Emmanuel. So basically, in summary, because conscious of time, he says, be realistic with regard to what to expect from a child. Beliefs underpin feelings. So to change feelings, we need to change the beliefs and change the actions, change the behaviors. That's the only way the feelings will change. Help the child develop a healthy work ethic at the appropriate time and the appropriate pace. It's important to program the computer while the child is still young and malleable and open, and learn, or rather teach the child to shift from moaning and complaining to developing a more constructive, solution-focused attitude, ideally looking for the good, for the opportunity in every situation, will be doing them a huge favor for their future. So, Neji, I've included on the next slide one more habit that is not in Professor Peter's book, and this is purely from Spiritist teaching. So parents basically have a great opportunity to help children to develop a great resource for themselves for the future when they're adults, to develop faith, a belief in a higher power, however we term it, whether it's God, love, goodness, Allah, however one terms it. And in the book Thought and Life, Emmanuel says, accentuate our trust in what is good, develop a positive inner certainty, a strong belief in goodness, and we will better reflect that good in our lives. And when I read that, I thought, wow, it seemed really strong. Develop a positive inner certainty, a strong belief in goodness. And I thought, wow, if you hold that as a bedrock in your mind, that will be so protective of the mind as we go through the challenges that we've had over the last 12 months. And he goes on to say, we now know and believe in the existence of electricity, but we still need a wire to connect a light bulb to the source of the electricity to access that power. And likewise, through our thoughts, that we need to make that connection to that source of goodness, to that love, to God. And prayer is obviously a great way to do that. A second thing that I would highlight here in terms of part of faith is teaching a child from a young age to learn how to forgive is doing them a huge favor for their future. Not to hold on to grudges, but instead to forgive, so that they learn to detox the mind, to heal the mind, to lighten the mind, so they don't bring conflicts or disturbances into the next day. And remember that thing about going to sleep. If the child has anything they're angry or upset about, teaching them from an early age to let that go, so that they're the winner when they learn to forgive and let go. And then thirdly, again in the book Thought and Life, Emmanuel speaks about look for the good in people, things and situations that cross our path in our day-to-day activities. By doing so, we'll have the mirror of our mind turned towards what is good in life. So it will become an automatic reflex, a mental reflex, and that will be imprinted on the mind and the minds of the children, that embedding healthy, positive ideas and images will help them build a much more stable, healthier and happier mind. And a mind that as a result will be vibrating on a higher frequency, and that will connect much more easily to other minds that think alike. So maybe at the end of the day or at meal times, ask the child to focus their minds on what is good until it becomes a reflex, an automatic habit, to discuss the good things that happened during the day, to look even for the good in challenging things that happened, is helping that child to develop a great strength for the future. And also could be a kind of, I don't want to say a game, but something that could be playful to have as a family, to develop that habit and learn together. Because of course it could be the adult as much or even more so than the child may need to develop that. So in summary, teaching a child to pray, to connect to that higher power, faith that there is spiritual support, and to learn from an early age to connect to it. Secondly, to forgive, to learn how to forgive the small and the bigger things, and to detox the mind, to clear out their mind. And thirdly, teaching them to focus on what is good will be doing them huge, huge favors for the future. So Neji, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to the next, to come back to Professor Peters and the Silent Guides, the book. He basically says, you know, new habits form slowly. And as Spiritists, we know that we're bringing habits that come from many, many lifetimes. And so patience is a must. And so it requires constant repetition and encouragement. And ultimately, the most important thing of all that a child needs is to know that they're loved and respected, to help them to develop stability. And so too does the adult. We need to know that we're loved and respected. And that is for us to give to ourselves, to learn to love and respect ourselves along the way. So focusing on gradual improvements and not expecting ourselves to move on in leaps and bounds, but instead to focus on progress. And so developing a growth mindset, not comparing ourselves to anyone else, but to ourselves. And so humility is essential for any parent or carer entering into this consciously, because as adults, even though adults, or at least in the body of an adult, we still have so much to learn, and to acknowledge when we make mistakes to the child, because the child will see it, because the greatest teaching of all is to be a role model, to live what we value, to walk the talk. And it can be really challenging for many of us who still have a gap between what we know or what we aspire to and what our reflex is, what we automatically do. There can be quite a gap. And so humility is will make that journey easier. So then finally, just to close off, Neji, please, on the next slide. I just want to recap with the 10 habits plus the one I mentioned there earlier, faith, forgiveness, and focusing on the positive. By no means is this a complete list of all there is to teach a child, obviously. I just wanted to share it because I think it provides a very good base of key positive qualities and helpful characteristics that can help a child develop sound psychological and emotional base for the future. I think from a Spiritist perspective, it's very complementary. It's educating the child across multiple areas of building good qualities and ethical values. And to close with the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 28, there are some lovely prayers for a parent to pray when a child has been born. We read that parents are given the duty of guiding the first steps of the children in their care and to lead them towards goodness, to help germinate the seeds of goodness within the child and to nurture them and prepare them for the journey ahead, to support the development of the child's intelligence, to help amplify and lead it to aspire to grow closer to God, that is ultimately the source of all life, the source of all love. That this child is in fact a spirit who's come back to continue their journey of growth, their journey of self-improvement. They'll be facing into challenges, experiences. They have already been evolving across many lifetimes and may, in some cases, even be more evolved spiritually than the parents. That the child or the spirit in the body of the child has the protection, has the help of their guardian angel, of their spirit guide to help them. And so parents or carers, caregivers of whatever kind, can help support them to access and learn from spiritual teachings to guide them and enlighten their mind. So at key moments in their lives, as well as in the day-to-day choices that they need to make, that they will have those spiritual teachings as a resource to help them to make better and better choices. So it's a fabulous opportunity, and certainly I think I have enormous admiration for everyone who takes on that responsibility. And may everybody be guided in that role. I'm sorry we haven't as much time left over as I would have liked, but in case there are any questions, please feed them through to Neji, because I can't see the screen. So Neji, if you want to bring down the slides. So.
Hello. Thank you, Tanya. It's great. Sorry, guys, for the mess with the system computer. Sometimes technology is not my strong thing, but yeah. So we have here a few comments from Elsa. I don't know if you have time to replace. I will show you. And here. And there, our dear Elsa, she said that sometimes students can make parents, teachers really crazy. What support can parents receive to know the balance between being a hard parent and too much soft? I think through the conversation, I think you already said something about it. But if you want to say something more.
I think again, I'll sort of quote from what I've read. I'm no expert. This is why I'm presenting this, is because it's an area that I'm interested in learning more about. I think firstly is for parents, the word of Maria Montessori is to educate themselves and prepare, ideally 20 years in advance. That's not much use to a parent who's dealing with a challenging situation, behavioral issues at the moment. But to basically focus on the desired behavior is something I know that I have come across, is to be calm and consistent with the child, because otherwise, as Professor Peter says, if the adult becomes very reactive and goes into chimp mode, then you've got a chimp talking to a chimp, and it can escalate. Whereas if the adult, he urges the adult to, or the parent, the caregiver, to stay as calm as they can, to be able to manage the situation and then talk things through after they have calmed down the child, because he basically says that when the child is in that chimp mode, they won't listen, they won't be able to hear reason at all. And so what he says is preempt these situations, that if we know that they're going to act out where there's lots of sugar, or where they're being asked to leave the playground, or where they're being told to go to bed, or where they're whatever the situation may be, is to talk it through when the child is calmed down in advance, in order to better prepare the belief systems, build in that belief system in the computer of more constructive reactions to situations. And again, consistency, being calm and consistent with the child is something that he repeats as sort of setting very healthy boundaries. So a way to preempt that is that bed is always at 7, half 7, or 6:30, or whatever time it is in that family, appropriate to the age of the child, but constantly holding firm boundaries. When a child is so reactive like that, boundaries are really, really helpful, because the risk is when the child pushes back so strongly that the parent will cave in, and that inconsistency, that variance, will then make the situation much, much worse. So it's, you know, again, I'm not an expert in the area. I'm just passing on from what I've read from these books.
Yeah, that's great. So unfortunately, we don't have many more times anymore. Elsa has another comment that I would like to ask you, if you can, please. She did on Facebook. If you can later go there, and maybe you can answer to the Facebook for her, because it's quite big, and we don't have time anymore. We have to close because Kardec Radio and the others, we have to continue the program, so we have to finish. But yes, it's a great talk, and like we can talk that for days and hours and never stop it because it's going. But it's great. And yes, Don said thank you. That is wonderful. Even for adults, as he said, it's great. And I think exactly like him. And I think for today we can close. And yes, because unfortunately we don't have much time anymore. But gonna be back next week, guys. Thank you very much for everyone who was watching and follow and comment. And once more, Elsa, Tanya, you answer your second question through the Facebook because fortunately we don't have time now. And we're gonna close our very quick final prayer. And I would like just to thank God, the good spirits, the guides of the mentors of Spiritual Society of Ireland, and all the mentors present here. Thank you very much for all the guidance, for all the amazing words. And thanks, Tanya, for bringing to us this amazing speech. That we all have a good week and bless with God and Jesus. So be it. Amen. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And we see you again next week on Tuesday on the same time with our show. Thank you, guys. See you soon.
Bye.